Hi, my name is Lauren Finch, and I chose to do my speech on George Washington. There are two reasons why I chose to do my speech on George Washington. First, I think his early life is extremely interesting, and second, I think he made a great president. Washington is known for many things. For one, he is known as the father of our country. George Washington, in my opinion, is known as the father of our country because without him, America wouldn't be what it is today. Before Washington served in the military or was the president, Washington was born into a very wealthy, well-connected Virginia family. Washington's family owned a tobacco plantation which contributed to his family's wealth. Being the first president of the United States is not the only thing that made Washington known. Washington also led the victory of the Revolutionary War. He was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, and he even presided over the writing of the Constitution in 1787. Before we get into his dominant political and military career, I am first going to discuss his early life. Mary and Augustine Washington were the parents of George Washington. Washington was their first son, and he was born on February 12, 1731. Washington's father died when he was 12 years old. His father's death prevented Washington from going overseas and finishing his education, and because of his father's death, Washington received the equivalent of an elementary education. Lawrence, Washington's half-brother, stepped into the plate and finished taking care of Washington. Lawrence helped Washington obtain his first job as surveyor of Culpeper County. And that's really interesting because when you think of George Washington, you think of president, you think of general in the military, but you don't think of surveyor. Well, being a surveyor of Culpeper County was a really great job for Washington, and he was paid nicely for this type of work. In 1751, Lawrence's death was approaching. Lawrence and Washington traveled to Barbados in hopes that the warmer climate would bring ease to Lawrence's illness. However, the trip didn't do good for either of them. While Washington was in Barbados, he got infected with smallpox, which actually left Washington's face slightly scarred. Because Lawrence's health did not improve, Washington and Lawrence traveled back to Mount Vernon, where Lawrence later died. After Lawrence's death, his position of general was split into 4 offices. Governor Dinwiddie appointed George Washington as one of the 4 generals. Thus, this started Washington's military career. Now, everyone knows that George Washington succeeded at many things and won many wars. However, there was one war that Washington did not succeed at, and one war that he did not win. And that war would be the French and Indian War. Washington was at the beginning of this war. Washington was there when it first started. The war started in 1753, and Governor Dinwiddie sent Major Washington to the French with a letter asking them to leave. Well, of course, the French didn't. After this, Governor Dinwiddie sent Washington back to the Ohio country to protect him. The Ohio Company was building a fort near present-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. However, before Washington reached the Ohio country, the French had already forced them out and begun construction of a new fort of their own. Washington and his men killed many Frenchians, including the French commander, which really heated up the French and Indian War. The French drove Washington's men out of the fort and forced him to surrender. Once Washington and his troops surrendered, the French allowed them to leave. This was, like I said, the only time that Washington surrendered and did not win his war. George Washington was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. In 1774, colonial delegates convened in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress to express the grievances against England and then communicate this information to the British leaders throughout the colonies. The Second Continental Congress organized the First Continental Congress on June 14, 1775. The militia was then transformed into the Continental Army. George Washington was known as the spirit of the Revolution. Without General Washington as the head of the Continental Army would have never succeeded. Because like I said earlier, George Washington's drive was excellent. And because he was the head of the Continental Army succeeded. In February of 1789, the Continental Congress authorized electors to cast their ballots for president. George Washington is the only president to receive all electoral votes. Thus, George Washington became the first president of the United States. John Adams received the second most votes and became vice president. It was not a surprise that Washington was elected for presidency. Washington was well known and he was liked from just about everyone. Everyone wanted him to be president. Washington was hoping to build a stable country for his people and also a stable country for future presidents. He also wanted to prevent sectionalism because he didn't want to divide this new nation. However, the new president faced many problems. There were problems with natives and pirates. There was problems with finance. There was problems with the banks. There were a bunch of problems that Washington had to overcome in order to be the good president that he was. Washington helped form the government by adding branches or departments. James Madison led the adoption of the Bill of Rights. The Federalists promised that the Bill of Rights would be added to the Constitution, and this made the delegates feel at ease. Like I said, there were several financial issues. One issue was the national debt, and the other was the financial assistance for daily needs. Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of Treasury. Hamilton put in motion the report on public credit in 1790. This was going to help the national debt, which made Washington feel better about the whole situation. Washington was offered $25,000 in salary, and then, what's really weird about this is when he was offered it, Washington refused. He didn't want the money. However, Congress made him take it, and Washington served a total of 9 years as president. And people actually wanted him to serve more. All in all, I believe George Washington did a really great job as presidency. I think he did a really great job in the military, and I still think he had a very interesting early life. I believe that his surrender during the French and Indian War made him a better general. I believe it made him smarter, and I believe that he made a great commander-in-chief. So thank you for listening.